What's going on, guys? Arekkz here, welcome back to another Monster Hunter World video and the next episode in my weapon workshop tutorial series. This is the series where I go over absolutely everything you could possibly want to know about a given weapon, right from the basic moves available to you all the way up to the main most efficient combos you should be using and some overarching weapon theory. If you guys missed last week's episode, then I went over how to use the switch axe, and over the course of the next few weeks I'll be putting together guides to cover each of the 14 weapons in Monster Hunter World, and today we're continuing that by turning our attention to another one of the ranged offerings, the Light Bowgun. The Light Bowgun is often seen as one of Monster Hunter's quote-unquote support weapons, and while it does offer great support functionality due to its speed, mobility, and plethora of fast status options, it is important to understand that it is far more than just that. Light Bowgun, much like any other weapon, is equally viable as a solo offering, and whether you choose to build around a monster's elemental weakness, or just build for straight raw damage, when used correctly, this weapon can go toe-to-toe with the rest. As a light weapon, it allows you to be more mobile in combat when compared to the heavy counterpart, and as such, this is a great entry point to bowguns if you're used to the movement typically offered by some of the faster melee weapons. While on a per bullet basis, you might not be dishing out as much damage as some of the heavy hitters, being able to dodge, dash, and slide mid-combat, all whilst maintaining constant fire on your target, means you can really rack up the damage in a very small window. In short, it's a fun, fast, and versatile weapon that offers a range of different playstyles. Now, before we dive in and go over the basic moves for the weapon, there's a couple of things you need to understand first. To begin with, let's very quickly recap critical distance. If you guys have seen the bow tutorial, then the principle is exactly the same. This applies to all ranged weapons, but in the event that you haven't seen that, then all ranged weapons work around a concept known as critical distance. Essentially, this is the distance you want to maintain in order to ensure you're doing the most damage possible. If you're outside of the critical distance, you'll do less damage, and if you're too far out, in other words out of range, then your shots won't land at all. So good use of this weapon will require that you maintain critical distance at all times. When aiming your weapon, a reticle will appear on screen. If you're too far out, then it will say out of range, and quite simply, your shots won't land. Meanwhile, if you move forward a little bit, you'll have the standard wider reticle, and this will then see your shots land, but you're still not doing optimal damage. Move a little closer again, and a second circle will appear inside this first reticle, and this is critical distance. Now, it's important to understand that for the bowgun, different ammo types have different critical distances. So something like spread shot, a close range ammo type, naturally requires you to be much closer. Meanwhile, a long range ammo type, say pierce, will see you put much greater distance between you and your target. So while this will take some getting used to, the on-screen reticle is your guide at all times. Just look for the double rings and then work around that. Furthermore, the bowgun, unlike most other weapons, has a relatively simple moveset, as you'll see in a moment when we go over the basics. It's not a combo heavy weapon, you'll largely be pointing, shooting, and repositioning. Your complexity, however, comes from your ammo choices and the way you spec your build. There's a dedicated section in this video that speaks about ammo, but ultimately this choice will influence how you play. Whether you want to focus on status and support, element or raw, these will impact your behaviour in combat. Where you stand, how you move, how you decide to mod your weapon. There are a lot of things to consider here, and it's all part of what makes bowguns fun. So, with all of that in mind, let's first begin by going over how you use the weapon, and then we'll tie it all together by talking about ammo types, mods, skills, and how you should use it in combat. First things first, you can press either R2 or triangle to draw your weapon, and then pressing R2 with your weapon drawn will see you fire your currently selected ammo type. Now, unlike bow, which needs the coatings to be applied, bowguns don't need the ammo to be loaded. You simply scroll to the one you want and then begin firing. Holding down L1 and pressing either triangle or X will allow you to scroll through your different ammo types, or you can press up and down on the D-pad to do the same thing. Either one works, so use whatever feels comfortable to you. I personally like using L1 and triangle and X since it makes it easier to swap ammo types while moving, plus it's just what I'm used to from previous games. But again, there's no right or wrong option here, just scroll to the ammo you want and begin shooting. Holding down L2 will bring up the aiming reticle. You'll use this a lot since it not only allows you to aim and be more accurate with your shots, but it's also, as mentioned, your visual indicator for critical distance. And when you factor in that the bowgun has different critical distances based on the ammo types you're using, it's nice having this here to keep yourself in check. Pressing triangle will then allow you to reload your currently selected ammo, and your ammo counter is over here on the right. Meanwhile, holding down triangle will allow you to reload all ammo in order. So if I empty out a few different ammo types, when holding down triangle, it'll reload my currently equipped one first, and then begin reloading from the top down. Bear in mind this animation does take longer, but it's a good thing to do in between engagements, or when you have a window where you're not doing damage. Pressing triangle and circle together will allow you to perform a melee attack. This is an impact attack, meaning it can KO monsters if done to their heads, But in truth, you're not really going to be running around meleeing monsters left, right and centre with this weapon, so this is generally speaking more useful for hitting stunned teammates, knocking back small monsters, setting off things like paratoads, and in select situations, detonating your Wyvern blasts. Speaking of which, pressing circle will place down a Wyvern blast. This is the Light Bowgun's special ammo type. They're essentially mines that you place on the ground, and they can either explode if you or your teammates hit them, or if the monster runs into it. You can see the icon for it over on the right here, just above the ammo list. You have 3 of these, and they can be placed individually, meaning you can either put them all down together for maximum damage, or you can use them more sparingly based on the behaviour of your target. Now it's important to understand there's more to Wyvern Blast than simply putting it down and watching it explode. So there are different tiers of explosions. It's a little hard to quantify exactly where these thresholds begin and end, but essentially it works a little something like this. When a mine is placed, if you inflict less than around 50 damage to it, it'll then proc a normal explosion. This is the weakest explosion for the mine, and you can proc this 5 times, meaning you can trigger 5 of these mini explosions before the mine goes away. However, if you land an attack greater than 50 damage and less than around 75 damage, it'll trigger a mid-tier explosion. This can proc 3 times before the mine is finished, and this will do around 1.25 times the damage per explosion. Then finally, hits that exceed around 70 to 80 damage will proc the max high tier explosion. This does around 1.5 times the damage per explosion, but will only proc twice before the mine is gone. Now again, it's a little hard to perfectly outline these individual damage thresholds, and it's even harder to reliably kick this out in combat when there are so many external factors to consider. But it's an important thing to understand because while it might seem like you always want to go for the big explosions, you can get some great value out of, say, 4 normal tier explosions followed by a final high tier explosion, since the damage numbers will rack up. But again, in the heat of battle, when the monster is down, you're more than likely just going to dive in, drop a couple by its head, and then start piling shots into it in order to deal damage and trigger the mines in the process. So more useful than that is a note on how you want to use them. See, the obvious way is to wait until the monster is downed, trapped, or otherwise incapacitated, and then you drop them by the head and unload your shots. This way you're dealing the explosive damage and the damage from your weapon. However, they can also be used both aggressively and defensively. If you're fighting something like, say, Diablos for example, a monster that charges a lot or comes out of the ground, then placing a mine so that it runs into it is a surefire way to trigger the high tier explosion, since the hit from the monster will more than likely exceed the high tier threshold. Additionally, it's a great way to break horns in the face of the monster, since if they run headlong into it, the explosions will often trigger the brakes and often cause flinches in the process. And if you want to be a little bit more aggressive, you can then actively pursue the monster and place these in locations you know that it will hit them. That being said, if you are doing this, you might want to consider just using 1 or 2, so that if you do then topple the monster, you have another to drop before you begin damage. Keep in mind, however, these mines only last for 60 seconds, so try to place them in combat at times that they'll be detonated, so as to avoid wasting a valuable asset in your arsenal. Moving on from there, pressing X will allow you to dodge roll, much like any other weapon. Meanwhile, pressing XX directly after shooting will allow you to first perform a little hop, followed by a slide. This is a great move for dodging incoming attacks last minute. There are some iframes in this move, and it just means that you can more fluidly go from shooting into evasion, as opposed to having to simply stop what you're doing and roll. It's also worth calling out that you can influence the direction of the hop and the slide with your left stick, so you can slide back, forward, left or right should you want to. Now that's pretty much it for the basic moves, so let's very quickly go over aerial and sliding moves. Sliding down a hill and pressing R2 will allow you to draw into your weapon and begin firing. Meanwhile, sliding down a hill and pressing X, followed by either R2 or triangle, will first see you jump, and then follow this with a melee attack. Now, this will do mounting damage if the attack connects with the monster, but more importantly, if you remain still for a moment after landing this attack, you'll go directly into a reload. So if you've been fighting, and you then slide and jump into this attack, it allows you to land, reload, and then very quickly get back into the action. Additionally, jumping off a ledge with your weapon sheathed and pressing R2 or triangle will again do this melee attack into the reload. But jumping off a ledge with your weapon drawn and pressing R2 will allow you to fire, and triangle will again do the melee attack. As for runnable walls, sadly no flashy moves here, so quite simply, running and jumping off the wall and pressing R2 or triangle again does the melee slap into reload. So, now that you have a basic understanding of how the weapon plays, it's now time to talk about the most important thing, your ammo. As mentioned, ammo is what will ultimately influence the way that you use this weapon, and it's where the depth begins to reveal itself. For the purposes of this tutorial, I've grouped the ammo types into 4 different categories: raw damage, elemental damage, status, and support. When crafting a bowgun or inspecting it from your inventory, if you click L3, you'll get a list of the ammo types it supports. Within this table, you can see the default ammo capacity, the shot type and recoil, and also the reload time. You'll also notice these 2 small icons. Ammo that can be rapid fired, well, it looks something like this. There's a degree of personal preference here, but I personally really like bowguns that can rapid fire, especially if it's my primary ammo. Sometimes the recoil is a little higher, so you might need to compensate for this, but again, drop it down to +2, and you can use this on the go. Just keep in mind that when you begin rapid firing, adjusting your camera won't adjust the remaining shots in the rapid burst, so if the monster moves, you lose some of your damage. Meanwhile, traditional single shot ammo allows for more precision, albeit at a slightly slower pace. Both have value and will largely depend on how you prefer to play or the bowgun that you're using. Keep in mind that not all bowguns can rapid fire all ammo types. Additionally, you have auto reload types. These will, as the name suggests, reload themselves when the clip is empty instead of you having to manually trigger it. Now as for the ammo types themselves, under the raw damage category you have normal, spread shot, pierce, sticky and slicing. Normal is your bog standard ammo type. The higher the number, the more powerful, and this applies for all ammo types. So normal 3 is more powerful than normal 2, which is more powerful than normal 1. Typically you'll use types 2 and 3, and then 1 will often be your base for crafting if you need to make more ammo in the field. In between all of the other fancy shot types you have, normal and spread shot ammo types will be your bread and butter. Normal if you want a little more range, meanwhile spread shot ammo is more like firing a shotgun. Considerably shorter range, fires in a wide spread, but is a great damage dealer, and also incredibly good at breaking parts. If you want the head or the horns broken, you use spread shot. However, on top of that, you have pierce, the longer range ammo type. To get the most out of this, you want to be firing down the length of the body, so while it's a good ammo type, it'll require a little bit more positioning to use effectively. Sticky, this is a powerful ammo type that sticks to the target and explodes shortly after, plus it can also stun the monster. Usually pretty big kickback on this ammo, and it's a little bit more situational, so it's not a general use ammo type like normal or spread. And slicing, this ammo can be used to cut tails on a monster. When the game first launched, people used to spam this for everything, but that's not really its intended use. Fundamentally, if you're playing solo and you need something cut, this can do the job. Then, outside of raw damage, you have elemental, flaming, water, thunder, and freeze. Elemental ammo typically has a much more generous critical distance window, allowing you to use it much further out, almost at the same distance as pierce. Given the speed at which the light bowgun can fire, much like you would do if you were using something like dual blades or sword and shield, if you spec for your target's elemental weakness, you can get great value out of these ammo types. On the status front, this is pretty self-explanatory. Poison, paralysis, sleep, and exhaust. Much like with melee weapons, piling these shots into the target will build up the abnormal status, and once it hits the threshold, the effect will proc. Light Bowgun is one of the best weapons at applying statuses in the game, so if you want to run a CC build in a team, this is a great weapon to bring. Again, the higher numbered ammo is more effective, so if you were to open a fight with, say, Sleep Ammo 1 and then switch to Sleep Ammo 2, or the same for Paralysis, you can then see the status take effect in pretty close proximity. Then finally, for support, you have Recovery Ammo, which can heal your teammates if you shoot them, Armor and Demon Ammo, which are defense and attack boosts respectively, Trank Ammo, which can be used in place of Trank Bombs when capturing monsters, and finally Dragon Ammo, which is like a bullet form of Elder Seal. It's a really slow firing bullet type, so it can be a little bit hard to land, but it applies the Elder Seal effect. So in summary, when dealing basic damage, you'll typically be using normal and spread shot ammos, with the addition of elemental if you spec for your target's weaknesses. Then alongside that, you can take advantage of these supported status ammos to control the monster in combat, and provide opportunities for big damage. Now, once you've got your head around the ammo types for this weapon, it's also important to understand how to mod your bowgun. When you visit the smithy and you scroll down to the Customize Bowgun option, you have the ability to add mods to your weapon. Now, mods are used to change the default properties of a bowgun, and the number of mods you can apply is tied to the rarity of the weapon. Bowguns of rarity 1 and 2 can apply 1 mod, bowguns of rarity 3 and 4 can apply 2, and bowguns of rarity 5 and above can apply 3. For the purposes of the Light Bowgun, there are 5 mods to choose from since they can't equip shields like their heavy counterparts. Additionally, a mod can be applied more than once if you want to amplify that particular effect. First up, recoil suppressors. This reduces recoil for certain ammo types, and while the game initially displays a table on the right with words like low, average and high, in truth this isn't especially descriptive, so if you click L3 you'll get a more useful numeric breakdown. Recoil affects the physical kickback of your weapon. When you fire a shot, the higher your recoil, the more kickback you get, and different ammo types have different recoil. The recoil will range from +1 to +4. +4 is very noticeable and will have a serious impact in gameplay, but +2 is the one you want to focus on really. +2 and below means you're generally speaking able to move and shoot at the same time. As such, when choosing mods, recoil will more often than not be your first choice since you want to apply it to attempt to reduce the recoil on your chosen ammo types. Reload assist, this one is pretty self-explanatory. It speeds up your reload times for specific ammo. Now the light bowgun is pretty fast, and in truth, I don't generally speaking find I need this too much. It's much more useful for heavy bowguns a lot of the time. However, again, it'll depend on your ammo choices. While a lot of the light bowgun ammos are quick to reload, there are still some slower options, and the quicker you reload, the quicker you can get back into combat. So it still has value, but you also have to weigh up your other options. Deviation suppressor, now this one is an interesting one and often causes a little confusion. The best way to describe deviation is that it ties directly into your reticle movement. When crafting a bowgun, it'll list the deviation level here. If the gun has no deviation, then you can't apply these mods, but if it has low or above, then you can use this to compensate. As an example, here is a gun with deviation and no mods applied, side by side with mods applied. As you can see, with deviation at its lowest, it's possible to fire without the reticle moving, which does have its uses in combat. However, it's important to understand that this doesn't have any impact on your physical recoil. So even if your reticle doesn't move, if you still have really high recoil, it's really not going to be that useful. So you should always aim to manage your recoil first, and then think about your remaining options. Then finally, you have close range up and ranged attack up mods. These increase the attack power when firing at either close range or long range respectively. Close range mods would apply more to ammo types like spread shot and normal, meanwhile long range would be for things like pierce shot. The first one you apply actually provides a rather noticeable improvement, around 25%, meanwhile there are diminishing returns for subsequent damage mods, with the second and third only offering a further about 5% on top, so while stacking all three will, without question, provide you the greatest possible damage boost, I'd argue that provided you at least slot in the first one, you're gaining the most important benefits. On the topic of normal, note that it has a pretty generous critical distance, and if you fire at the outer limits, you won't see the benefit of the close range mod, so aim to use it a little bit closer to remain both at critical distance and take advantage of the mod. As a point of reference, usually about one roll away from your target is the optimal distance for the close range mod. But to summarise this and give you some clarity in your choices, the first thing you want to do is decide what ammo types you're primarily going to be using. What's your main damage dealer? That'll likely influence your weapon choice in the first place, but once you know that, throw on the base damage mod relevant to your ammo choice, and then look at the remaining options. Do you need to further manage your recoil? Do you want faster reload? Or can you afford to just stack more damage? There's a degree of personal preference here, so you want to play around with these and decide what best works for you. Now, let's talk about armor skills. Assuming you've got to this point and you're thinking of giving this weapon a try, then what should you be looking for in your armor skills? Well, first up, as always, this applies to every single weapon, but your usual damage focused skills like attack boost, weakness exploit, critical eye, critical boost, agitator, maximum might, even peak performance, any of those will provide value. However, in addition to this, three very important skills in further increasing your base damage output are normal shots, pierce shots, and spread/power shots. Depending on the ammo type you intend to use, let's say for example you are using normal type ammo as your core damage dealer, then you should without a doubt be running with the normal shots armor skill. It provides a noticeable boost to your damage and will go hand in hand with any other attack focused skills you decide to stack, so pick these based on your ammo choice. I run a spread shot build a lot, so spread shot skill is a staple on my builds. Furthermore, free element/ammo up for the bowgun. This increases your loading capacity, meaning you can load more of a particular ammo type, allowing you to shoot more bullets before you need to reload. This is commonly found on Kieran legs, which is why you see this armor piece in a lot of gunner builds. The focus armor skill can be used to speed up the rate at which your Wyvern blasts recharge, so if you want to make more frequent use of them, then consider that. And to pair up with that, special ammo boost will increase the power of your Wyvern blast, so if you want to build around this specifically, then these two skills will provide great value. Of course, if you're speccing for elemental ammo types, then consider the relevant element attack boost skill. Although it's worth noting, based on the elemental damage limits, you typically only need 3 points in any given element to hit the max, so you won't need to spec beyond that point. In fact, if you do so, you won't see any additional benefit, so you're just wasting slots. And finally, you can also run evasive skills like Evade Window or Evade Extender to give you more breathing room on that Light Bowgun dash should you want to. Of course, there are some other options too, but as a starting block, they are some good skills to pursue. Finally, to round things out, this was a new addition in last week's workshop, and you guys said you found it really useful, so it will be a staple moving forward. For the combat test, we're going to quickly dive into a complete hunt, and I'll pull out a few sections and talk about what I'm doing and give examples of the weapon being used in actual gameplay. This time we're fighting Black Diablos in the arena, and I'm running with my spread shot build, and Duro Bullet is my light bowgun of choice. I've modded it so that spread shot 2, my main damage dealer, is recoil +2, so I can move and shoot, and this gun also uses sleep ammo 1 and 2. I use spread shot 2 more than spread shot 3 since I can fire more shots before needing to reload, so ultimately there's less downtime between my damage rotations. However, given that we can use sleep 1 and 2, we're going to open this fight with sleep 1 to get in some early sleep bomb damage, and then we'll take advantage of the added strength of sleep 2, paired with my sleep attack armor skill to get a second sleep right after, before we then go in for the damage. So that's the first sleep, and then fast forward a tiny bit, that is our second sleep. So, now that's out of the way, let's focus on damage. Spread shot requires that I be relatively close, and for Diablos, my main focus will be the wings. It's where my shots are most effective. I only have a 2-star effectiveness on the head, meanwhile I have a 3-star effectiveness on the wings. So while I'd shoot there to begin with, if I wanted to, say, break the horns, when dealing the most of my damage, I want to focus on the weak spots. Since Diablos likes to charge a lot, I want to be placing down strategic Wyvern blasts, but I'll only be using them individually. That way, should she topple over, or I get a better opening, I still haven't wasted all of them on random chance. A little bit risky here, but since she's digging underground, I'm going to stand by the Wyvern Blast so that she hits it when she comes up the ground. I should have timed my dive a little bit better there, but hey ho, this stuff happens sometimes in combat. Switching over now to Paralysis Bullets. This gun doesn't actually support Paralysis Ammo 2, nor do I have any armor skills for it, but it doesn't hurt to get a free Paralysis in the hunt. Given that it's the first time trying, it's not going to be too hard to apply this regardless, even with Paralysis Ammo 1. It's some easy damage, and it's good to control a monster like this that has a tendency to move around. You'll also notice there that quick slide dash was useful for going from the left wing through to the right wing, straight under the head. That way there's minimal downtime in between damage. So you can use this not only to evade, but also to quickly reposition so that you can continue your damage rotations. Another thing to note is that you can perform the dash slide after placing a Wyvern Blast too. So in this situation, she digs underground, I place a Wyvern Blast late, then I use the dash to get out of the way so she sets it off, takes the damage, and I'm not in harm's way. And then to round things out, this is why it's always nice to use the odd Wyvern Blast defensively. Whilst running away from the incoming damage, Diablos went and killed herself on the Wyvern Blast, meaning I didn't even have to do anything. So, there you have it. That's a quick look at some Light Bowgun action in the arena. Hopefully this combat test gives you a little bit more clarity on how to tie it all together. If you did find this tutorial helpful, then a like would be super appreciated, and be sure to comment down below if you have any questions. But otherwise, keep it locked as there'll be another weapon tutorial next weekend. And thanks for watching, take it easy, catch you next time, peace out.